meeting to order. Roll call.
Councilman Henwood.
Here.
Councilman Doran.
Here.
Councilman Monty is absent. Councilman Vidal.
Here.
Councilman Jordan.
Here.
Councilman Bartolome.
Here.
And Mayor.
In compliance with New Jersey's Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231 Public Law 1975, I hereby declare that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided, specifying that this meeting would be held on this date in the municipal building, 55 River Road, Edgewater, New Jersey, at 7 p.m. This notice was sent to the Record and Jersey Journal, posted on the bulletin board in the lobby of the Borough Hall, and posted on the borough's website. This time I'd ask for a moment of silence and ask that you keep Arthur Dalton and Betsy Taylor McPartland in your thoughts. Councilman Doran, will you lead us in the salute to the flag?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight on the conference, we were scheduled to have Chief Skidmore up first. He's running a little late, so we'll actually switch up the order. We'd ask that I park. You have the mic, so you're right.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm Lynn Ward from IPARC, and with me is Carl Monhart, also from IPARC. Carl is based here and is responsible for all the construction. I've been responsible mainly for the approvals, and with my colleague Joseph Cotter, who is on holiday this evening. We are really here this evening at the administrator's request in order to answer any questions that you may have. As you are aware, we are seeking an amendment to the redevelopment plan, and I think somewhere in the process there is an ordinance and some other steps that I'm not all that familiar with that are being undertaken right now. And I understand that, of course, both the council and planning board are required to offer comments on this and give adequate time for its consideration.
You're also here asking to re-amendment to your housing obligation, the affordable housing, correct?
I think we're doing the required 75 units.
Yeah, there's a resolution on the agenda this evening, which essentially, as the borough attorney, the planning board chairman, and I have spoken about, is when IPARC comes into the planning board for any type of amendment or subdivision or approval, typically what's incorporated in that is the affordable housing component, which tends to get discussed and brought up every time they come before the board. So essentially what the resolution does is approve a waiver whereby color regulations call for the placement of affordable units once so many market rate units are built. However, the original redevelopment plan was approved always with the building of an affordable housing building. And essentially, the resolution is just reaffirming that. And then once IPARC goes before the planning board, they won't have to address that once they seek the amendment.
I believe that's correct, but I have not seen that resolution.
Okay. Well, I believe what Greg was trying to say, a certain, once you start giving out so many COs, your affordable housing obligation kicks in.
What Greg said made common sense.
Okay, so now we're saying that we're aware of the fact that you're going to be putting all your affordables in one building. So we're looking to pass this resolution so you can move forward with your
That's
project.
right. Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Regarding the building that the affordable housing is supposed to be located,
Originally, it was planned to be the southern portion of the property. Has that changed?
Yes, it is in the central portion of the property now.
Okay, I think I remember seeing that. It's going to be closer to where the bank, or further back on,
In fact, it's almost immediately behind the Borough Hall.
oh, okay.
And towards the two existing buildings. It's close to the parking garage, and it's generally we believe, a good location for those units.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to ask a question to you and to Greg and to Phil. With regards to Catherine's update or report last meeting with the clarification on the widths and the offsets and whatnot, are we all on the same page? Is everything good?
We've made all the corrections to reflect the original presentation, that they will be permitted to add an additional 100 residential units. They're going to introduce a hotel. They're going to introduce a retail component for a bank. We have maintained the easements, the setbacks, the landscaping, and all of the other concerns that were raised when the first draft of the revised plan came through. They did not accurately reflect what we had agreed upon. So that has now been addressed. So we feel that the ordinance is, pretty close to being the way we want it. There were a couple of additional items that we had addressed with Hyde Park. Mayor, I think we discussed that the last time, I believe.
Yes.
Our borough administrator, I don't know if you're prepared to go through those or how you want to address those at this time.
Well, the major changes to the redevelopment plan, like you said, 100 market rate residential units, reduction of commercial square footage from 100,000 square feet to 85,000 square feet. The inclusion of one freestanding bank, not to exceed 3,500 square feet. The inclusion of a hotel, which is not previously included. The increase in lot coverage from 75 to 85%. And parking garages, now permitted as standalone structures rather than requiring retail and office uses to be incorporated.
There is one additional out parcel, retail, but it's included in that 85,000 square feet that you quoted.
Okay. Well, Lynn, I would just like to go over, I know you probably received the letter, and Paul Kaufman somewhat addressed it, but we did have, the Borough Hall needs its LEED certification.
Right. We need to meet with your professionals regarding that because there's some technical issues that we need to address together.
Okay.
So that's, as I would say, that's in process. Some of the technical issues involve the landscaping, which has irrigation, which was the borough's request and a very sensible one, but not LEEDs compliant. So there are things like that that you need to give us the opportunity to get into with your consultants. And I think your rose bushes are going to turn into bramble bushes and natural grasses. But that's just by way of what happens with leaves and that type of thing.
Okay, but
Okay.
then also.
They're small technicalities which we will address.
Okay, we have the contribution to pump station number 4.
Yes, another thing that we would like very much to meet with Natalia on, we presume that we're 2 years, all of us, out of date on exactly who's using the pump station. So we need simply to have our engineers and doors meet. The contribution is not in dispute at all.
And there's also a contribution of $350,000 for emergency communications.
Due in May of 2014 and duly budgeted and scheduled by our to be paid.
Okay.
Well, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
We're doing a lot now for Hyde Park. So when you're saying due May in 2014, I know it's contractual, but still, the fact that we're giving access to a hotel, I mean, I'm sure this out of the 4 obligations that you've given the town.
That's a very interesting point. We'll certainly
All right.
meet with you to discuss it.
Great.
Yeah, we're not looking for a one-way.
Okay, as long as you know that we, like.
The original agreement provided for this payment to have already been made. It was at the request of Hyde that they requested that they defer the payment toward the police communication system that we have. I believe that cost $1 million. Is that correct, Greg? So the borough funded what they felt was required in order to have a state-of-the-art police communications system. IPART was obligated to make a contribution toward that, and as their project had going, they had asked if we would defer that to a later date.
So for Councilman Doran and Attorney Bosher, the good news is that the bad times that we were in
Right.
when we made those requests
That's what
have
Councilman
somewhat
Doran
passed.
suggested.
And so we are reasonable people too,
Right.
and we appreciate your having been reasonable. We've been here since 2004, and the period from about 2007, 8 was horrible for us all. It's got a lot better, and we are mindful of that.
You are a true economic leader. Just real quick, last minor point, the hotel is a married courtyard, and it's not a Fairfield, it's not
No.
a Comfort Inn, or, okay.
They will be before the planning board
Thank you.
to present themselves. It's the new model, by the way, of Marriott Courtyard. There are 17 of them scheduled for the country. One is already open. It's outside Boston, and there are several other locations, and this is not your father's personal work.
Any other questions? And sewage charges are going to be calculated the same way in IPARC as they are in the rest of the town.
That's something that I need to meet with the engineers on. I don't know how that works.
Well, it's good, if you don't mind, I mean, thank you, is that calculated to the
I
hotel?
see Carl is telling me the same is the answer.
What?
The answer to you is the same. Carl just indicated to me that it's the same method.
That's proportional to the use of the development, correct?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Mayor, if there's no other questions for when the board, what the governing body may want to consider is forwarding the proposed ordinance that has been prepared and circulated to the mayor and council and distributed to the planning board, which we're required to do. And they would, at their next meeting, review it and respond back to us whether they're in agreement with it, whether there's any changes to it, and then that would, start our process of ultimately adopting that.
Lucy brought up the ordinance for the amendment to the redevelopment agreement.
The ordinance has been completed, it's ready to be referred to the planning board in its final form. Unless, there's some minor change to it, but assuming there isn't any, we would have to refer it to the planning board, and if the governing body wishes, they could ask Greg to do that. Whatever this process has. I mean, it's up to the mayor, it's up to you.
Do not believe there are any changes. There's certainly no request by us.
I don't know if you were ready to do that, or.
That's fine.
Okay, so I'm clear, it's a motion to submit the ordinance to amend the redevelopment plan for IPARC to submit it to the planning board.
When you say submit, I'm sorry, I apologize. Is it already written, or is it just writing it and submitting it?
No, it's completed.
It's completed already?
Yes.
I think Calvin was in the last time the plan was in to address some of the concerns we had.
Right.
Really, nothing's changed since then.
Yeah, as a result of the planner's attendance at the last meeting and the discussion, the borough attorney drafted an ordinance, and that's been circulated. So that will be presented to the planning board for consideration. And then if the planning board approves the redevelopment plan, that ordinance will then come back to the governing body for an introduction and subsequent adoption.
Councilman Henwood, as to the motion to submit the ordinance to amend
Has
the
it been,
redevelopment.
it's just a vote now?
Just a consensus as to
Consensus, okay.
submit the
Well,
ordinance.
I think that times have been tough, and you guys have responded and done some good work. And I trust that our professionals will continue to be very careful and look at things, because there's been some gray areas, and we'll continue to do that. So I say yes.
Councilman Doran,
Say yes.
Councilman Vidal,
Yes.
Councilman Jordan,
Yes.
Councilman Vitale, mayor?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
I believe the next planning board meeting is the 26th. See if it's going to be set on the agenda. I'll speak with the chairman. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask one thing in closing, please?
Sure.
I know you're always so busy, but we would like to host you anytime you would like for a tour of the development. I repeat that at every meeting. I'll get you there Monday.
I've got to see them, seen the units already, and they look great.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We would do with criticism too. So please don't feel, you know this area better than we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Pat Segaden from, in regards to the Edgewater Colony contract. Pat, it's your time, right? Sure.
Just bring that mic closer to you now. Just for edification, I invited Pat here this evening so we can discuss the potential land swap, which Pat will describe in detail, as far as the amount of acreage of the proposed boat docks and the replacement acreage that Green Acres requires for the diversion to be completed. And you can address any questions you have with Pat. Pat's has been working on this project from its infancy and has met numerous times with the colony of the borough of Green Acres. So she's well-versed in the process, and she'll explain.
Thank you. The application that we're working on is the pre-app, had required us to come up with the diversion plan, which would show the existing and pre-existing historic docks that are located in the Edgewater colony. And from there to take a measurement of, it was originally 4 feet around each dock, which is an invisible line from any regulatory rules, but just to have what they call a buffer around each dock. And that area is what they calculate as the total diversion area for each dock. So over, I guess, since May, we had submitted progress prints of what we were proposing as far as the docks, and asked the Green Acres program to look them over with their surveyor to see that we were, meeting their requirements. So we're now at the point where they have approved the diversion plan, which comes out to about 1.063 acres, and just a little over an acre. And we also, over this past months, have been looking at candidates for replacement in kind. So when they say in kind, it is basically having property that is existing non-public property that we can make public. In that regard, we had a few candidates that were presented to Green Acres, and their position is that if, in fact, the property has any restriction in that So we had some easements, I think, that we were talking about as candidates. And the time to present it is now. It's not in a final format, but just place a list of candidates that would come up to the same acreage or approximately the same acreage. We could be over, we can't be under, and present it as part of the application, which would basically be a tax map, location plan, and any environmental information we have regarding those candidates.
So the candidates are within the colony?
No, candidates weren't, well, we did identify some of the property that were, that is in the colony along River Road that would provide public access, maybe can be, improved in the future with a bike path or some recreation, for some recreational use, and would have, direct public access to public. There's, again, if it's wetlands, we would have to get the DEP to look at the wetlands and basically release use of wetlands for public, public space. Take the restriction off the wetland for us.
Well, they've done that before, correct? I mean, that's where kind of how we started this. You're talking to make the Rossi list. We had the riparian of the colony in on the Rossi, correct?
Now, I'm talking about first, the wetlands that are on the river, the already restricted wetlands that went into conservation easements back to the state of New Jersey. So there are more candidates that we had looked at, and some of them that we looked at were already earmarked for public access. So we couldn't.
Well, obviously, with the diversion, as a borough, we were looking to come up with the amount of property, and I witnessed Greg multiple nights, pulling his hair out to try and come up with property. And as you looked at the existing properties that the borough could offer, as a borough, those sites might offer, down the road, they could be potentially beneficial for road expansion or anywhere in town. I'm not just saying that River Road would be expanded, but some of the properties that came up that the borough could offer, I would feel uncomfortable giving them up. So what I'm saying is, I know that the property, there have always been advertised available properties within the borough, within the colony. And what we're asking is, we need to come up with some land, and would the colony be willing to, help out? Because, it's been kind of tough for us to come up with.
And on the colony side, we went through the site, and apparently there are lots that, according to their agreement with their lenders, the proceeds of any sales of new properties there must go back to the lender. So, believe me, I talked with Green Acres about seeing if they can, we talked about Hudson River Walkway maybe being able to be utilized. We talked about possibly along down to the Oakwood Colony, maybe some of that property that is already somewhat restricted. And we're at this point where, if we can't find something in Edgewater, there's state folks to try to look outside and see if the county has anything. But this is right now the only thing that we are waiting for is to come up with some candidates. And, maybe we have to have some more discussions with Green Acres about, how they view these options, these properties, and maybe they can give us some other properties to look at.
So with regards to some of these potential candidates, what are the restrictions on the candidates? In other words, can you potentially buy a lot that already has an existing home? And let's just say, I'm just hypothetically here, and that house gets knocked down, that becomes a vacant lot, and that gets turned into a park. Is that a potential?
The proceeds from the lease can be used to purchase, maintain, operate, as I understand it. That's the whole purpose of the lease, to generate funds so that there can be replacement.
But Pat, I think what Councilman Goodell is asking is before that, when you submit the pre-application, we have to provide that acreage that is going to be removed for the dock. So I think what he's asking is if some entity purchases a piece of property, levels whatever existing structure is, and turns it into a park, that can be utilized towards the acreage.
Yes.
Because I personally think it's really a sense of fairness. We represent the entire town, the people of Edgewater, and it's really tough in my mind to have an argument that says, for dock owners, I just will say I've been out of the colony 52 since I was 18. I grew up from 1 to 18. I love the colony, but I just really can't, in my heart, say that we're going to take land from other places to accommodate this as offset because, I know the 3 or 4 parcels that you have for sale are going to offset the sewage. Maybe not. I won't say it's a fact, but and that's your agreement, so you're handcuffed with those. But to Councilman Vidal's point, you're probably going to have to end up with some other solution because it's not fair. It's not fair that we should have to accommodate that, in my opinion. Thank you.
My concern is that if that was to happen with, you're looking at over an acre of land, that's several lots. My concern is that we lose rates on that. If you don't have a structure on it, the tax rate on that is probably what that land is worth, if I'm not mistaken.
But aren't we talking about, Greg, pieces that exist within the borough that aren't currently used that would just sort of be earmarked, so it's not like there's a rainbow there that we might off?
One of the discussions Pat and I had early on was, and the easements that Pat was referring to is you have the park area at 1 Hudson Park, which is a deed restriction with the borough being party to. It was never listed on the recreation or open space inventory. The same goes for the park in Undercliff by Avalon, where the borough is not a party to that. However, we discussed the possibility, how the borough can possibly assume ownership rights to that property to utilize for this. Now, Green Acres had an issue with some of those areas because they felt that those were areas that already are considered open space, and they were looking at something that was new.
Yes. That's what they were looking at, the fact that it was part of the sidewalk system, public sidewalk system again. You cannot basically create this replacement with an existing sidewalk system and units public. And it's restricted for public use. You can't say, okay, now we're going to make it more.
Greg, with that said, to the mayor's point, with the few scarce pieces we have left, whether it's expansion or eminent domain, we may need it for our own use, to the greater good of the other 90% of the town. And to say that we're doing that for docks, I think I'm gonna stop now. I won't say anything more, but I think you're really gonna have to go back and talk to somebody in some other creative ways of doing it, because I my heart would never go for that.
Now, the option is teaming up with another entity, whether it be the county. But with that option, now it leaves us in worse shape, because what could easily be accomplished with resources that we have, meaning the excess property, now we have to come up with money to acquire property outside of the borough. So that's another challenge.
If it's gone, it's right.
Right. So that's the other challenge we're left with. If you're not utilizing properties within the borough that are owned by the borough, now Green Acres lets you work with another entity such as the county, but now, of course, to acquire those properties, you've got to come up with funds. So we're in a dilemma.
Well, that's the dilemma, because the earmark is to take the proceeds from the lease and apply it to either purchase or maintenance. And that was all along what the colony intended to do, was to pay the lease for that purpose. And that's, I think, how the lease is very fundamentally as well.
I'll go back to my word and say something more. That was maybe your understanding, that was never something I understood. And that's a non-game. And why would we do that? Why would we allow, I mean, that's a shitty revenue that, quite frankly, historically, we shouldn't have all along. That's now been fixed to move forward to offset something.
Well, I can say, I don't know how, and what I hear from the history was that properties were put on the Rossi list and have to come off, and that they're encumbrances. And the colony is willing to pay to have these encumbrances removed off the parkland and for a term as we have in the lease. And that term is for each dock holder to pay, but it's all under the colony's.
The payment's the lease to use the water rights, right? It's not for to purchase land.
Yes, it is, to purchase land or maintenance.
Well, no. Let's clarify. The mayor's correct, because the proceeds of the lease agreement, when we met with Green Acres, those proceeds that were to be established in a separate trust fund were to be utilized for other open space Green Acre initiatives.
For maintenance, right, for maintenance?
Well, they did say that originally, but then they clarified that even further with Pat.
Right, and they wrote an email saying that we can purchase property and the proceeds to replace.
But my understanding is that we have, how many acres, Greg, on the Rossi list? Just pick a number.
6.
A lot.
2.
A lot. And you were looking for a way to legitimize the docks that exist in relationship to DEP.
Well, to legitimize the docks that exist on the riparian land that the borough owns,
Right.
number one.
Right.
And to legitimize those docks that don't have permits.
Okay, so we were going to entering into a lease agreement where you would pay for the right to occupy borough property and maintain a dock, and that money would go into a separate trust fund to maintain all the other existing Green Acre sites in town, whatever required, cleanup, improvements.
Yeah, but originally it was we had it as understood it to be for the purchase. Originally, and then what happened was it went down.
Wouldn't this governing body have to know about that?
Well, it is for the purchase. It says per acquisition.
No, we've been at this for a real long time.
Yeah, but originally we had clarified this because it was a couple of months ago. It was part of that.
But what you're saying is you want to pay us rent money so that that rent money can be used to buy replacement land.
Well, we always understood that the borough was going to look at what was available for replacement.
Can we start from the beginning? When this whole concept came about, there was no diversion application. The original approach, I thought, was that the governing body was going to work with the colony so that they could seek approval from the DEP to legitimize the docks that exist, pre-existing docks, and there would be no replacement property. Wasn't that the original? And now that may have changed over time, but that, right?
You're absolutely right. In the original application.
Right, because that's what we all thought we were dealing with, because
Absolutely.
not everybody on this council has been living with this.
Absolutely.
As long as you have.
Originally, yes.
Right. Now, is it not also correct that the colony would like to not only legitimize the docks that exist, but also get approval for future docks?
No, not anymore. In the original application, that's the way it was, but not in this application.
Okay, so
They're only applying for.
how How many docks?
I want to say 18.
That was 18.
So there are
18 maybe
18,
plus one.
there are 18 existing docks.
Well, they were either existing docks that exist today or docks that existed in history, historical docks.
They have to provide historical
We have
data.
to-
Right, now what about the ones that have permits for but have not been built?
That is, the one that has a permit for, is one that has a permit.
Okay, and you would like,
That one has an approval, that as long as the borough consent.
but that triggers a replacement property.
Well, that was always a part, one of the parcels that we were talking about.
No, you know, I understand that's what you would like, but I'm saying that the one dock that has not been built, the DEP has issued an approval,
Yes.
but that dock triggers replacement property.
That they
It
all,
will.
they all.
No, but that one's not built yet.
But they look
That's
at
going
it
to be part
that,
of the application.
No, I understand that. I don't want to, you know, when this whole conversation began, it was about trying to assist the colony in validating and legitimizing all the docks that exist. This expanded into a much bigger request, not only docks that exist, but future docks. Now, this has changed, and I don't know if anybody else has been kept up to date precisely how this has evolved over time.
Well, that's why I invited Pat.
Right, but, you know, I think the best recollection that the governing body has is when this whole thing started. And I don't know if everybody really knows how it has evolved. It used to be for a much larger number, now we're back to.
Phil, what happened, Green Acres had advised the colony, along with Pat and myself, that let's address the existing docks only.
Okay.
And that is the pre-application that Pat's working on. As of now, the council doesn't even have to concern itself with any future proposed anything, just existing. So we want to correct the existing docks that currently exist.
and the other thing that DEP has done to us, is create these buffers that really pump up the area that we need to replace, which is what they're making us do. I mean, we didn't want to do that. I mean, we didn't want to do that, but they're insisting that we have to have this imaginary buffer around each dock, which takes us from, we were at 0.59 when we started, now we're up to 1.063. And we're not making the docks any bigger, we're not doing anything, we're keeping what's existing or what had existed, or what was approved by DEP. So, you know, for us, we're looking at, a cooperative effort, and if this is a snag, well, we're gonna have to resolve it. We should really try to resolve it. So I just lost the whole month trying to figure out what the heck to do.
I really go back to my word, I'll say one more thing. I mean, 18 people, it's a perfect case of tail wagging the dog. I mean, I don't want to be flippant and say it's not our problem, but it's really not our problem.
The whole situation is that when you start off with a process that had existed, and then it becomes an issue like that, and then you try to resolve it, you have all these things that go on. These people were not, these people were on the river for I don't know how long. I wasn't here. They had docks. They built them. Nobody said anything. Then all of a sudden something happened, state meet or whatever happened, that they were on a WASI list, and now they have to come off the WASI list. So it's like all this stuff. It's not an easy situation. It's a very, very difficult situation.
They should be happy with all those years they got away from them. And now they got it back.
Again, I'm going to tell you what my understanding was, that the lease, under this minor, the lease proceeds, and then determines, what they're paying every year to the borough when they finally get this approved, will go towards their acquisition, maintenance, operation of roads.
So if the borough decides to use it for maintenance, the existing Green Acres property, how do we replace the?
We won't get a diversion without replacement. That's the bottom line. I just don't understand.
So
That's what that's the avenue we're on. It has to be replacement.
So if there is an obligation to find,
And the monetary.
if there is an obligation to find approximately 1 acre of replacement property, and believe me, I've prepared the original lease, and I will admit, I have not been following this. I know you and Greg have been following this. You're saying that the lease payments would go toward paying or finding and acquiring replacement property?
We can show what we have on our mind, and then.
So you're going to identify 1 acre of property somewhere, and
Well, it doesn't have to be 1 acre.
it could be several parcels, but collectively 1 acre of, to be exactly, at least 1.063 acres of land. That's going to cost how much money?
Well, you know, again, we were understanding that we were going to, Borough was going to provide us with some candidates. We didn't have any candidates.
Well, you know, like I said,
And I'm not trying to get an argument about this.
No, it's no argument.
I'm just trying to understand that we were under the impression that the borough was going to use the proceeds to replace it.
well, that's the first I heard that. And just to go back as far as I can remember, I feel the borough's been very cooperative in this whole process. When I watched Greg, when I came down like Greg to look at the existing properties, I repeat, that they're on major vessels, you know, traveling vessels in this borough. And I looked at Greg and I said, you know, I don't think it would be smart for the borough to give up that property with the potential of possibly having to widen the road. So whatever parcels you're looking at that the borough, you might think are perfect parcels for the colony, but we might be thinking, you know, down the road, we don't know if we might have to increase the roadway.
We're not trying to interfere with anything that was going to be future improvement. I mean, we very carefully, we spent time looking at it. And one thing that we were looking at the colony on River Road, that there is a portion of a property that is probably 2.18 acres. And I said to Greg, well, River Road, we're talking about River Road, it's wide, and you need to do that, and this, we should really know what the plan is so that we know whether we can utilize any of it for that candidate.
My concern here is, and let's see if I understand this correctly, the lease agreement, which I believe was about $1,800 per dock, is that correct?
And I believe that was increased, correct?
1820 was what was agreed upon between
Okay.
the borough and your borough appraiser.
So if we multiply that times the number of docks, which is about 18, we're getting, that comes out to approximately $36,000.
If you add,
I'm sorry.
18
times
right, 18
1800.
times, right. It was
About 34,000. 1.063 acres of land could be well into the millions in Edgewater. That will take us about 100 years to purchase.
Let me ask you this, just as a suggestion, because I know we're going to have to start looking for other opportunities here. The 3 parcels or 2 parcels, whatever left that you're selling to offset the cost of the sewers and all that stuff that you have the right to do, you're saying there's restrictions on that, but in fact, 18 people could get together and buy those 3, or the 116 shareholders of the colony, or whatever up to now, 120, could all get together and buy that and operate.
That was never.
Well, I'm saying is, you're going to be looking for alternatives, and that might be an opportunity.
Suggestions, a good suggestion.
Yeah. It's expensive, but again, it's really not, we can't put other people's hands, it's not fair.
Again,
Yeah.
there was no intention,
No.
we thought the borough was going to come up with the replacement of areas that, yeah, it was just a small little bit.
Oh, but
At the
because
beginning.
of your water now, yeah.
No, there
Well,
was a couple of-
there's a thing we certainly can't control,
There
right?
was a couple of candidates that we talked about, and they came up, and I went to look at them to see, whether they would qualify, 22 or 3 acres or something. And, we talked about whether, the edge of a cliff, this was, qualification.
Sounds like the next association meeting at the community house is going to be quite a meeting, because you guys are going to have some tough questions to talk about, because you're going to have to figure it out, with all due respect.
And I think it needs to be made clear that the fees that we're gonna be collecting on these docks were not going to be used, not if I'm not mistaken, at all for the purchase of any of the diversion acreage. Am I on the same page as everyone else? And then that was, we had no intention of using those funds to purchase anything. Was it a fee?
Well, that, again, it was, you know, that's, you have the right to purchase or continue.
Right.
The right.
We'll probably not use that option.
That would be what that states that you have the right to do that.
Right.
So,
Good luck, sure. You got a challenge in it, good luck with it. And I'm not to be disrespectful at all, I'm really not, I'm just saying.
I'm the one that's really lost it because, I mean, from day one, when I had gotten into this, we had a major application that was DEP's idea, it came up with a solution to the suggestion, do this whole conversion plan. And then we get there and, oh, no, we want it this way now, so we do it that, we started that way, and, you know, again, these people that are in this development have been there, maybe not done physically themselves, but that.
And most of them haven't been, quite frankly. Most of them haven't been.
Not them, I'm just saying the docs have been there for some time.
Most families are long gone.
And again, the whole idea was that they didn't create the problem together.
Yeah, but what was me is not gonna work here because all those folks are basically new, basically a whole different configuration in terms of homes, in terms of their,
Well,
you know.
the other thing, they did change, they built the docks.
But that was way.
The borough of Edgewater did not build the docks.
No, I understand.
And when Greg was saying he would try to find a replacement property, if there was some miscellaneous piece of property that was not currently on our Rossi list, that didn't impact the borough at all, and the borough could somehow accommodate it and put it on the Rossi list, it didn't hurt us. What I'm saying, if there was one little pocket of property that somehow was not on the Rossi list, and it should have been on the Rossi list, I think Greg was trying to see if maybe we could put it in there, maybe that would help.
Sure.
But as he explored this more, they were on important right-of-ways that maybe a turning lane could put in there someday, or maybe it'll be needed for road widening. The other thing I think it's important, Pat, is to point out that the colony signed an agreement with the DEP back in 2004 to address the docks that have been put there without DEP approval. And the colony signed that agreement, agreeing to address this problem. And so this governing body and several before were not part of that. We did not know about that. And that was a responsibility they took on to deal with. And to the extent we could accommodate and assist the colony, we agreed to do that because I've been involved in this in the beginning. And I haven't followed it as closely as you and Greg, but I agree with the mayor that, and Councilman Vidal, that the money, the rent money, if you want to call it that, was going to be used to maintain existing green acres, not to fund.
Well, that was again under the.
I know, but this governing body doesn't know that. I mean, you know it, and maybe you had a conversation with Greg, but you would really need the consent of this governing body to have worked that into that agreement, because my last draft of that lease agreement never, ever had that